Hey guys, into the end here with a kind of a sweet brew today. It's not quite revolutionary, it's just simply a evolution of other decks that have existed with a bit of a twist. So at first glance, this deck may look like an unfocused pile of a mess, but it's got pieces from different decks and it looks like it has an identity crisis. It can't make up its mind if it's an aggro deck or sort of a gimmicky interaction deck or a control deck. At its heart, this is a mid-range attrition-based value deck. For those of you who play Magic in the modern format, this is most similar to the Jeskai mid-range deck, and it's trying to sort of nickel and dime your opponent, picking up small value here and there until it builds into an overwhelming advantage. One thing I really like about this deck is that it has the flexibility to play both the control role and the aggro role, depending on which portion of the deck you drew and also on the deck that you're running into. One thing I don't like about this deck, though, is that it's not particularly great against any one matchup, but it is universally okay against all matchups. So no matchup is hopeless, but no matchup is a sure win as well. Let's go over some of the key concepts here. First of all, it's not 75 cards. These are sort of the core to the deck, and the other 8 card slots are flexible, and you can tweak it as you see fit. So, I run 27 power sources, and 2 of them is a monument, which counts as a spell. I think monuments are great, as long as you have ones that are usable. I chose the Shadow Monument over the Justice one because I'm not a huge fan of playing weapons onto units. I find myself often wishing I had a chump blocker or another threat middle to late game when I'm running out of resources. So I find that the Shadow Monument is much better than the Justice Monument in this particular shell. The core cards are here. We'll start kind of backwards. 4 Harsh Rule. This deck doesn't go big enough to fight the mid-range, mid-late game big unit decks, usually with time. So you need a way to reset the board when you're fallen too far behind, to the point that your life-stealing units are no longer sufficient to race. In control decks like Chalice, it uses expendable units like the 1/1s, the 0/2s, the 2/1s that enter the battlefield and give you some kind of a benefit to sort of stall out the board and clutter so that your opponent is forced to overextend into their Harsh Rule. In this deck, you do it a little bit differently. You use fairly strong life-stealing units to force your opponent to overextend because they need to put a lot of attack power onto the board to overcome your lifesteal. So, and because of the Harsh Rule, this is the card that sort of gives you the flexibility to playing a little bit more aggressive or playing a little bit more controlling. If you are falling behind on board and you have a Harsh Rule in your hand, you can usually sort of just bait out your opponent's creatures. Most people don't suspect Harsh Rule in a deck like this. As soon as they see cards like Silverwing Familiar and Valkyrie Enforcer and Hammer, they're not going to suspect a Harsh Rule from you, so they will play right into it. Your suite of units include Bartholo, Hero, Silverwing, Valkyrie, and a couple of revenge units over here for pure value, really. They're not super amazing. They're just, once again, in an attrition-based deck, they nickel and dime you. Every time this Stone Powder Alchemist enter play, you do 2 damage, gain 2 life. That's a 4 life swing, and when he dies, comes back. That's an 8 life swing in total. And chump blocking, gaining 2 is not bad either. And of course, it is great at carrying weapons. One of the problems I have with using weapons in games like Magic and in games like this is they're conditional. When you run out of units and you draw one of these cards, they're actively bad. And having revenge units that come back virtually increases the unit count in your deck, the unit density. So that really sort of helps to ensure that you have units to put your weapons on. None of these units on its own are particularly powerful. In fact, they're 2 power, 2 toughness, 1/1, 1/1. They're actively bad actually in terms of power and toughness on their own, but they bring some value. Every time they're cast, they give you a little bit of value here and there, between shrinking your opponent's units, silencing them, maybe luring out multiple removal spells to get rid of the Aegis to kill your Silverwing, and between coming back 1 extra time with the revenge units, or in case of Makoto, the infinite number of times. None of these are particularly game-breaking on their own. Once again, your game plan is to be an attrition-based deck, a value-based deck, and you're going to nickel and dime your opponent to exhaust their resources. Once in a while, you do get to build a superhero, a 6/6 unblockable Aegis, lifesteal, revenge, flying powerhouse, and in those games you pretty much win. But that actually doesn't happen very often. That's the dream, and that's why it's here, but it doesn't happen all that often. Mostly because the hero of the people is a lightning rod. Every time you play it, someone's going to shoot it. It never survives very long in the game. So even if you have all the cards in your hand, most likely people would kill the hero, and you won't get the combo off. But that is actually a very good test to see whether a card is good in your deck. If every single time you play it, someone kills it, then that means it's a very high priority kill for your opponents. And you can use it, and that passes the test. I think that tells you that this card is incredibly powerful, and if they don't answer it, well, not incredibly powerful on its own, but in combination with a few other cards, it can be incredibly powerful, and people are threatened by it, so they kill it while it's still a 1/1. Only total of 5 weapons. I've already said that I am not a big fan of weapons. I'm not a big fan of conditional cards in general. So conditional cards are ones that you need a condition to be met before they can be used. Cards like unit buffing combat tricks, like Finest Hour, cards like Devour, weapons. These are all conditional cards. In fact, removal is also a conditional card. Condition is that your opponent has a unit. And I would like to limit the number of conditional cards in my deck. The more conditional cards you have, the more you're going to be exposed to variance, where you draw a handful of cards, like maybe you have a Devour, some removal spells, a combat trick, and one of these weapons, in which case you can do nothing until you draw a unit, or if your opponent plays a unit. And if he doesn't, and he plays, say, a relic weapon on you, then there's nothing you can do and you have a dead hand. And I would like to avoid those situations as much as possible to reduce variance in the game. So, your removal suite has a lot of options between Suffocate, Annihilate, Vanquish, and Slay. You can play any number of those. You have 8 flexible slots. You can increase the removal count as you see fit, depending on where you are on the rankings and what meta you're facing. Personally, I would run no less than 3 Slay, because it is the best removal spell in the game. And then the rest, it's up to you. My personal preference is to go a little higher, Annihilate, because it's a fast spell. I choose it over Vanquish and Suffocate because I think fast spells are great. It gives you some surety when you're attacking your superhero into your opponent's 3 open mana, and you're worried that they may have a Scorpion Wasp to ambush your hero. That's very good. Your opponent plays a Predatory Cranosaur with Killer, and it's just going to kill your Silverwing Familiar carrying a hammer. You can use Annihilate to stop that. So having instant speed removal is really, really important by my books, and I'm willing to take the drawback of not being able to kill other good units, like, say, Seraph, or multicolor units like that. So that's my personal opinion. The final innovation to the deck is the Sabotage. I'm a really big fan of this card. I really like Hand Disruption. If you play Magic and you play decks like Jund, I think one of the things that makes the deck very good is the fact that it has access to Inquisition and Duress. And Sabotage is basically a Duress. While I like Hand Disruption, it is not the main reason why I play it. One of the main reasons is because there's not that many good 1-mana spells. And doing nothing on turn 1 is a really big tempo loss, and I need at least 2 decent turn 1 plays so that I can avoid doing nothing on turn 1. And I like Sabotage before playing Hero of the People, because typically once you strip their first removal spell, it'll take them a couple more turns to draw into a second one, and hopefully by then you can slam Hero and then put Silverwing Familiar down, and then now you have a fairly strong 4/4 flying lifelinker with Aegis. That would be the ideal. Drawing this card late is unfortunate. It could be a dead card, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. So that's it. That's the whole deck. The remaining 8 slots, you can do whatever you want with it. There's a lot of options, but what I recommend though is try and find good 2-drops, because you can see the curve here is very, very heavy on 3s, and basically 2-drops are non-existent, and that's the biggest weakness of the deck. You can't reliably do well if you're doing nothing on turn 2. So the version of the deck that I'm running, I call it Inquisition's Rule, Inquisitor's Rule. Inquisitor, of course, is Magdal's, and Rule is Harsh Rule. This is the version of the deck that I'm running. I put in 4 Dark Wisps, 2 Devours, and I upped the number of removal spells, 3 Slay and 3 Annihilate, and that makes up the 8 cards difference. This is the version that I'm running. I like it quite a bit. I've been winning quite a lot of games with it. I think my toughest matchups are against time decks with Predatory Cranosaurs and perhaps Chalice. It's a very difficult deck to play against. Chalice out nickel and dime you by quite a bit. So Chalice is a deck that has a game plan similar to yours, but actually better at executing it. And any time-based deck with large creatures like Sandstorm Titan and Predatory Cranosaur with Killer that bypasses your Aegis also destroys you unless you have a decent number of removal spells in your hand. So that's it. I will be making more videos showing how this deck runs. I think right now with this deck over the last few days, I am definitely above 50-50. I think it would be closer towards a 60% win rate with this deck so far. So I'm pretty happy with it. I may switch out the Dark Wisp and Devour suite to something else. There's so many options here you can swap to, and I haven't fine-tuned the deck enough to know that this is the perfect version, and this is very far from the perfect version. So let's get to it.